Welcome, everyone. This is the BERDO Review Board hearing. We just started recording this meeting. So if you would like to stay off the recording, please stay on mute and turn your camera off. Good afternoon. My name is Hannah Payne. I'm the Director of Carbon Neutrality in the City of Boston's Environment Department. The review board does not currently have an appointed chair, so I will lead the board in a vote for an acting chair. Does anybody want to make a nomination for an acting chair?
I nominate Lee Matsuda. Oh, sorry.
I'll second that.
Great. I will now lead the board in a vote. So how do you vote for the motion to nominate Board Member Matsueda to serve as acting chair? Board Member Boyd?
In favor.
I'm just trying to see. Do we have Board Member Coletta? Councilor Coletta, are you on? Maybe not yet.
I am. It's good to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. How do you vote on the motion to nominate Board Member Matsueda as acting chair?
I agree. Yes.
Great. Board Member Ellis is not here. Board Member Jacobs?
In favor.
Board Member Lattimore?
Aye.
Board Member Matsueda?
In favor.
Board Member Nelson?
Aye.
Board Member O'Malley?
Aye.
Wonderful. So the ayes have it, and I will now hand the meeting over to Acting Chair Matsueda.
All right, thanks, Hannah, and good afternoon, everyone. Happy Solar Eclipse Day. I'm calling this public hearing to order at 4:37 p.m. In accordance with the Building Emissions Reduction and Disclosure Ordinance regulations adopted pursuant to the Building Emissions Reduction and Disclosure Ordinance, Boston City Code Ordinances Section 7-2.2. The BERDO Review Board will hold a virtual public hearing at 4:30 p.m. on April 8th to review the following topics in regards to the reduction of greenhouse gases from the building, energy production, and consumption so as to promote the public health and welfare of Boston residents. In accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this public meeting online to ensure public access to the deliberations of the BERDO Review Board. The public may access this call through telephone and video conferencing. Members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment. To do so, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. You can also send your questions to staff via email at BERDOReviewBoard, all one word, @boston.gov. So for the record, I am Lee Matsueda, acting chair of the board. I'll now conduct a roll call, board members. So board members, please just say your name in the order that they appear on the slide.
Rashida Boyd.
Gabriella Coletta.
Lavette Jacobs.
Gail Lattimore.
Lee Matsueda.
Jack Nelson.
Matt O'Malley.
Great, and welcome, Councilor Coletta. Great to have you join us. We'll have our staff join us now. Introduce themselves, yeah.
Good afternoon, Hannah Payne, Director of Carbon Neutrality in the City of Boston's Environment Department.
Good afternoon. I am Ziggy Chin. I'm the new BERDO Review Board Assistant. I'm a recent graduate of BC, and I just came over from Veolia Technical Solutions. Nice to meet you.
Awesome, fantastic, and welcome, Ziggy. Great to have you. So we're gonna put up on the slide the agenda for today's meeting. As we typically do, we start with the approval of meeting minutes. The environment staff will then present some updates on the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund, excuse me, and then we'll get some administrative updates and adjourn. So let's move to our first agenda item, please. So first on the agenda is to approve our previous meeting minutes from March 11th. Before we take a vote, are there any just questions or comments regarding the meeting minutes? Okay. Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
I
Thanks,
second that.
Thanks, Livette, for a second. So for all the board members in favor, you can say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any board members that abstain? Okay, any board members opposed? You can say nay. All right, I think the ayes have it. So we'll make sure that those notes from the last meeting are made publicly available on the website, and we'll move on to our second agenda item. So now we're going to hear from the Environment Department. They're going to provide an update on some of the public feedback on the fund, and we'll also get some updates regarding some of the limitations of having like seeded funding from the operated budget, right? I think we've talked about this in the past about where some of these resources are coming from, and there have been some questions. So really appreciate the team kind of looking into it, and I think we'll start with you, Hannah.
Great. Thank you. And apologies in advance with how I'm sharing my screen. My slides are over here, so apologies for the weird eye contact. So just a quick update on the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund project evaluation form. We have shared out the draft project evaluation form that the board has reviewed, as well as proposed application outline, and we are and we have a survey up about the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund where we're collecting feedback. We've shared these items with in a number of spaces. We've shared them with our various newsletters in the Environment Department, the BERDO newsletter, the Review Board newsletter, and our larger Environment Department newsletter. We've shared them with all of the Review Board members of our Community Advisory Group, which advised on the BERDO regulations process, and our Commercial Real Estate Working Group. So we are accepting feedback until Friday, April 12th. So that is this Friday. And so far we've received 5 responses to the survey. So hoping to get some more by the end of the week on that. So as we have shared with the board previously, the initial seeding of the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund has been made with operating dollars from the city budget. Future investments in the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund will be coming from alternative compliance payments, and the rules on how we can spend that money are different than when we're looking at city operating funds, because city operating funds come from taxpayers. So there are a few different requirements that we have to be aware of in how we're looking at our ability to expend these funds. So two laws to be aware of when we're looking at how the city can spend operating dollars. The first is Massachusetts Anti-Aid Amendment. So this stipulates that expenditures of taxpayer funds must advance a public interest, and has restrictions on how funds can be spent on public entities. Sorry, private entities. It has to be for a public interest. Then MGL 30B, which is about procurement and how we can procure things from the city, dictates that local public funds distributed via a grant agreement must go to nonprofit organizations. So I'll get into these in a little bit more detail, but these are kind of some of the parameters that we have to look at when we are looking at being able to spend the operating funds, which is what we have for this first application cycle for the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund. The fund is a public has a public benefit. So that is good in terms of being able to clear the first hurdle for the anti-aid amendment. So the money in the fund shall be expended for the support, implementation, and administration of local building carbon abatement projects that aid the city of Boston in reaching its carbon neutrality goals and help improve air quality for the residents across the city. So this is a clear public benefit of the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund, but there are some other things that we need to keep in mind to stay within the bounds of the anti-aid amendment. So we have, in talking to our law department and procurement team, we've identified 2 options for how we could disperse funds from the Equitable Emissions Investments Fund this cycle. The first option would be to have a grant application. So we would have a grant agreement, and this would be available to nonprofit organizations that provide building decarbonization services. So those are the entities that could apply for grant funding from the fund. This would be, in this context, the review board would open an application cycle where only nonprofits that provide these services could apply and receive the money. So really the idea of these kind of grant funds or grant opportunities is to fund nonprofits in expanding the work that they're already doing in community that provide a benefit. This nonprofit could not receive the money for their own buildings. That's kind of a restriction that we've come to learn. So they'd have to be doing this work in buildings in Boston. Some of the positives of this would be that any building owner could be eligible to receive the services from the nonprofit. The nonprofit could limit those services in some way, but in general, it could be eligible. The end recipient of these services could be private owners, nonprofit owners, and condo owners. Really, there's no restrictions there. And the services could be all-encompassing. So they could provide scoping, planning, engineering, design, and implementation and construction dollars. The cons would be that the pool of potential direct applicants would be quite limited because the entities that could apply directly to to receive the grant would have to be a nonprofit doing this work. And then the second piece that could be a con would be that the review board would have less say in the end recipients. So the review board would select the entity to grant the money to. That would be the nonprofit doing these services, but then the nonprofit would go into the community and do this work and find the building owners to work with. The review board wouldn't necessarily be selecting those end building owners. We could add conditions to the grant, such as sub-recipients who we could add conditions to the grant, such as that the sub-recipients or the people the nonprofit is working with would have to be located in environmental justice communities, or other considerations that the review board would take on, but we wouldn't necessarily be able to say the board wouldn't be able to say we want to support building A, but not building B. You'd have to write rules for the grant agreement that would kind of cover the broad categories that you'd want to support. Option 2 is we would go through a city procurement process. And so this would be the city would go through a request for proposal process or an RFP. So that would be a contract between the city and vendors to provide services as scoped by the review board. This would be, so in this case, the review board or the environment department would secure a contract with a vendor. This could be a private or nonprofit vendor that provides decarbonization services, with a stipulation that recipients of the services meet the review board standards and criteria set out for who should receive those end services from this contract. In this case, the review board would have more control over who the recipients of the services are. So you could have more say over the review board is actually going to select the buildings that can get these services from the vendor providing them. The downside of this option is that it can only be used for scoping, planning, designing, or engineering. It cannot be used for actual construction projects in buildings. That's kind of where we start to run into anti-aid amendment challenges. So I know there's a lot here. These are kind of the two options that we have scoped out. And before we jump to Q&A, I'll just say that I think that, we are hopeful that like this money can be used for a lot of really good building decarbonization work that advances the goals of the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund. And I think either of these options could work well. And I think we could do one or both of them to try out a few different things, but really want to hear from you all in terms of if there are some things that you would really like to see prioritized in this first round of funding. And I would also just like to say that there are a few other funding sources and initiatives in place. So just for your own awareness of other things kind of in the mix. One is the City of Boston. Our team received just under $660,000 for the equitable emission. Nope, wrong acronym. The Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant, which we'll be using to help BERDO buildings develop zero over time plans and their decarbonization strategies. So kind of really high level planning for the most part for that. The Mayor's Office of Housing has programs specifically for affordable housing, both for decarbonization planning and then also implementation money. That's through ARPA funding. Then Massachusetts Clean Energy Center has what they're calling the BETA program, and they are also are supporting decarbonization studies for different building types in Massachusetts. So there are some things in this space already, but there is definitely a need for more. But just wanted to share those as kind of some other things that are in the mix, and we could definitely look to for examples from the scoping and design and planning side of things. So that is what I had to present. I know you probably have a lot of questions on that, so happy to take questions from the board.
All right, thanks for all of that, Hannah. So I think we'll just go down the list. Council Coletta, often what we do is I just go down our list of board members and we'll ask folks if you have any questions or comments you'd like to make. Often we'll have time, maybe to come circle back if need be, and then I'll always want to make sure we have time for public comments as well. So I'm just gonna, in this case, just go down the list, starting with board member Boyd, and then we'll make our way down the list and then see if anyone needs any more time after that. So yeah, board member Boyd, any comments or questions that you have on this topic around the Equitable Emissions Fund priorities, just questions about everything that the options that kind of Hannah offered?
No, not right now. I want to read it to see. Just want to read the details so I can know what we can do and what we can't do when it comes to this. So I have to look into it a little bit.
How about you, Councilor Coletta? We'll go to you next.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I just want to thank everybody so much for their work already. It's an honor to be here in my capacity as Chair of Environmental Justice, Resiliency and Parks Committee. And I want to thank the team for your work on this. We are a model municipality when it comes to these organizations. So just kudos to what you're doing. And it's implementation or ramp up to implementation stages. My first question when I saw option one was how many nonprofits provide this work? I just don't know. And I'm leaning towards that option just because I see the value in any economic investment in community-based nonprofits that will go beyond these decarbonization efforts. although I don't know how many there are, what their staff capacity is. I'm always a fan of investing in these sort of organizations rather than going sort of the private route, but I just would love to know more of how many orgs do we know that does this work. And I really look forward to the conversation too. I'm happy to be here and still getting educated on everything.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Counselor. We do not know how many nonprofits there are doing this in the area. I think it would be a quite limited number. But we've just been focused on trying to get the understand the parameters of what we can do. But we can try to find out, do some research to understand that. Certainly would be an estimate unless we went forward with doing like an RFI, a request for information of some sort, but that could prolong then doing the grant application. So we can try to do a little bit of digging and bring that back to the board.
So, but Hannah, that would be for nonprofits who are doing engineering and zero overtime type plans, putting plans together, or doing implementation of energy conservation measures or electrification projects. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
I think there
don't
could
know
be
of
some that
anyone.
are doing workforce training in this space as well, as long as they're doing actual projects, because they do have to be building decarbonization projects. There's at least one that I know of. I think there may be more, but there are not that many. That is definitely a constraint.
Wow, yeah, I don't know of one.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
going to
well,
be a challenge.
Really good
I
question. That
work
we
for, oh, go on, sorry.
No, Rashida, go ahead. And just before we go on, I think there's a request from the chat. Can we just pull back up option 1 so just everyone
Sure.
can see it while we're talking about it? And then please, Board Member Boyd, go ahead.
No, the company I work for, like New Ecology, they verify, they have ratings and stuff, but it's only one company, like you said. It's a lot of work out there, and it's a nonprofit, New Ecology, right downtown, and they do all verifying. The engineers, they do everything. You know, they do everything, but it's one company, and there's not a lot of raters and people. So I might look into it and see if I can find some other companies. But because I know we're about to be swamped in this area. So, all right, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, thanks, Council Boyd. Council Lattimore, do you have a comment specific to this? Because I think it's fine if you want to do that, and then we'll continue with the list.
Yes, just real quick, I agree with Board Member Boyd about New Ecology, but I do know there are other organizations that may not do soup to nuts, but that are used to, and there are nonprofits that are focused on energy and decarbonization, that while they may not directly have all the suite of services, likely will have the ability to subcontract. So that's a question about how that might work with the city's, rules, for this, can they actually subcontract? I think about the LISC, Local Initiative Support Corporations. I think about Resident Energy, perhaps. I think about All in Energy, Power Options. I think they're all, if I'm not mistaken, they're all nonprofits. New Ecology is an excellent example. So that's what I wanted to add to the discussion.
Thank you, Board Member Lattimore. I'm gonna go to Board Member Ellis is not with us, so Board Member Jacobs.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you to the board members for, always putting together these slides and keeping us up to speed. If we could go to slide number 8.
Apologies, I don't have the number. Is this the correct
Oh,
slide?
okay. I'm sorry.
It's
So
previous slide.
slide number 8 says updates and discussions. It is option 1.
Option 1. Great.
Where it talks about the pros and the cons. I guess I'm leaning more towards I don't know, I think that's probably like one of the diplomatic things about me. I'm for it, but I guess I want to know what is the proposal for us to decide like percentage wise on how that split for the funds is gonna happen. I remember it was about maybe a meeting or two ago where we were you know, really honing in on how some of the less fortunate or smaller tenants that own buildings, they're gonna need funding for the scoping and planning. So I wanted to know, like, what's the implementations, like how we're gonna go about dividing up those funds, because while I do feel like the nonprofit organizations, obviously they need it as well, but I'm still like reverting back to that percentage wise, because I don't want it to be where, like, you know, there's a nonprofit organization that's just substantially large and, you know, they take up a nice portion of funding versus us being able to divide it amongst, you know, I don't know, possibly 5, maybe 6 smaller entities. So that's what I have a question. I'm not even sure if I worded the question right, but that's my concern is what I should say.
So yeah, so I don't know if this is answering your concern fully, but
Go ahead.
I
at the
think
same
we
time, that'd be
could,
good.
the board could start with issuing a grant, like to request or a grant opportunity, and see what comes in, and then decide if you know, if you do want to move forward with a grant option 1 to start, like, and then seeing like what sort of interest there is and who they're serving, and could also then look at doing, you know, at a later date, this is just a proposal, could go either way, a RFP that would be the like procuring a vendor, and delivering really direct services. So for context, that's what we'll be doing with the with our EECBG money, and we've done with some other procurements that the BERDO team has been doing like a procurement process where the city selects a vendor, and then that vendor is then serving BERDO buildings. But there's definitely, and then the other piece I would say is around the total $3 million. I would think it may be a smart idea to not release all of that right now, and do a smaller portion now, so that you can then learn from it, and then board member Jacobs, to your point around saving some for kind of future buildings that may not be as on top of it, may not know about funding now, to be able to take advantage of that as well in the future. So there are many ways to kind of break this up, and a lot of different options that could be considered.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Annie. You did a great job of answering my question. Sorry, it was a little all over the place, but there's a lot going through my head at once.
Right. Thank you, Board Member Jacobs. I thought it was very clear, so I'm following you. Board Member Lattimore, let's go back to you. Any just other questions or comments you have?
Yes, thank you. So, you know, I think option 1 is for me probably the more comprehensive one in terms of the ability to do a range of things, a range of uses of the funds. I am concerned, however, about even though I know there are different nonprofits that may be able to serve in the capacity to do this, to act as kind of administrator of the fund, I'm concerned that it's such a small pot to begin with, at least. And so I want to, and then paying for someone to do it, you know, takes away from the cost, you know, that's already small pot, and it probably be a relatively significant portion of the 3 million. So that's one issue. But before I give a potential third option, which may or may not really make sense, wanted to ask about the additional funds you talked about, additional 660,000 in ARPA. Is that already included in the 3 million, or is that on top of? And
All
then
of the
other-
things, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. The
Go ahead. I just want to, and I'll have another part to the question, but go ahead.
everything that I mentioned was in addition to the 3+ million that's in the Equitable Missions Investment Fund. Those are separate, not in the Equitable Missions Investment Fund.
Right.
They're different
Thank
pots
you.
of funding that
The
building owners
ARPA
can access.
Okay, so the ARPA money is in the city's control, but the other pieces are not, are things that are separate from the city, like the Mass CEC money, et cetera, not coming into the fund, but just separate opportunities for people, correct?
So yes, so the environment department, my team is is receiving the EECPG funds. So that's the $660,000. That won't be going into the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund, but it will be serving BERDO buildings, so serving a similar purpose.
Got it.
The Mayor's Office of Housing has their affordable housing programs, their green energy retrofit programs that they've been running. So that's a city initiative, but with ARPA money. And then the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center has their program and they're a state agency, quasi-state agency.
And that's not money that Mass CEC is giving to the city. It's money that people apply separately to Mass CEC.
They're giving technical assistance to building owners.
Yeah.
So they're giving money to building owners.
Right. And so it kind of, thank you. I appreciate the responses, Hannah. It kind of goes back to on the one hand, it's really helpful to have an entity that can help manage the process and the funds. On the other hand, there's a cost to that. And I'm wondering if there's a third option, which probably is just as costly, probably, to have the money stay with the city and be managed that way. But that might also be another additional staff person needed for that. So it may end up being just as costly, if not. But that was just the third thing I wanted to understand, if that was at all an option.
So in response to that, I think that the option that what you described would be closest to option 2, with the city kind of holding the contract with a vendor. So that vendor could be a nonprofit, that vendor could be a private entity, but they would be doing a scope of service that would have a public benefit. So that, and then they could be serving building owners. So a scope could be develop, do energy audits and develop BERDO compliance decarbonization plans. And the city would define that scope and then say, you will do this for building owners that the review board selects.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That would be option 2. No,
I read the contract with the vendor as an administering contract. It's the city administering it and just leasing out a vendor to do the actual decarbonization analyses.
Yep.
Okay, got it. And that I like, but that's very limited in terms of the scope of work that can be done. So I guess those are my only comments. I can't give you a preference right now, but those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Lattimore. I have a bunch of thoughts on I mean, I guess just to take a step back, I mean, one thing that and maybe you've already shared this and I just forgot, but is there a timeline on the when we actually need to spend these dollars?
No, there's no, well, there is a timeline of, we have a commitment that the board will open applications for the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund, so release a round of funding in this calendar year. But there's no obligation to expend the funds by a given time.
Okay.
And this calendar year does not need to be for all of the available funds.
Okay, good. So if we don't choose to spend or aren't able to get it all out the door by the end of the calendar year or the end of the fiscal year, even, it's okay. All right, that's important. And then I think the other question I have, I mean, I think I also lean towards trying to figure out how to make option 1 work. You know, the other thought I'm having here is like, I don't know if we know how much, like, my assumption is implementation eats up a huge amount of resources, right? And I'm not saying that that's not important to do. I'm just saying I wonder if at this stage we focus on getting, you know, resources to you know, buildings in EJ communities to make sure that they have the right resources to scope out exactly what's needed for their buildings. And so just trying to figure out how to make effective use of this. I'm even open to considering like a hybrid approach of the options, But a lot, what's in my mind right now is just like, how much are we talking about for this first year, this first go around? I'm eager to do it, and I also, you know, limited resources, so I want to make sure we do it well. So I'm definitely leaning towards option one, but I'm open to even considering, you know, maybe there is one contract that's there that's operating at the same time, and we can see what kind of support that offers. And you know, I don't see why we wouldn't also have some very clear requirements about what neighborhoods and communities and buildings that that's serving. So in any case, I think I'm open to both. I'm interested to kind of think more through that. And I guess at a certain point, we don't have to make this decision, it sounds like, as a board now, but soon, about kind of how much are we thinking for this first go around? And is it just one or the other option? Or are we open to entertaining kind of trying out a couple of these different things to see what actually gets you know, our buildings and our communities and these EJ populations kind of the results. So yeah, I think I'll stop there right now. Thank you. Board Member Nelson.
Thank you, Lee. Yeah, so continuing on that discussion, I think option two gives us the most control how we apply the funds towards ultimately the buildings or owners that will benefit from it. As long as it's for studies and engineering work. It can't be for implementation, correct, Hannah? But here, could we go out in the street for RFPs for for-profit and not-for-profit entities who could do this type of work, and then pick 5 contractors who then we can choose for different efforts, and have them as the 5 preferred vendors to do that work?
I believe, yes, I personally have not done a contracting process where we're hiring multiple, but I believe there's a way to do that.
Okay. So then we would review applications, and then we could select the owner or building where that work would be conducted, and then we select the engineer who would do that work, one of the 5 if we're allowed to pick 5. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I believe that would work. The way that I had been thinking about it, that I think I'm just not sure about the 5, but in taking that same example, and if we had selected one vendor, one firm to do that, then the board could then review applications of people who wanted those services and then assign that work for those buildings to that vendor to complete, as long as it's within the scope of work and budget that was set out at the beginning of the RFP procurement process.
Okay. All right, and that way there wouldn't be a middleman between us and that entity doing the work under this option. Where on option one, there potentially could be an entity in the middle.
I believe there could be, but it wouldn't necessarily be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And and there's no way that a not-for-profit building owner can apply for these funds directly. A healthcare entity or a housing entity that's not for profit.
To do work on their building, like let's say a community health center applied to replace their HVAC system, right?
Exactly, yes. And they had, you know, they got the plans were done, they had it bid, and they had it all, you know, shovel ready. And they were applying directly for the funds. They wouldn't be able to receive those funds directly.
That's like the biggest gray area, I will say. I think in some cases it may be eligible, and others it may not be. And that's where that line is tricky for, like, that it would have to be on a case-by-case basis. So in most cases, we likely would not be able to pay for that with operating dollars, unfortunately. So that's where we were kind of steering away from that because I think that's the most likely to have a conflict. But there may be some cases where they could be eligible, but we'd probably want to be clear upfront in our application processes, and that's why we were not including that option.
Okay, are you going to flesh that out a little bit further before this all becomes, official? The potential for a not-for-profit owner to receive those funds directly?
So this is why we did not include that as an option, because we think it is not likely to be allowable. But there may be cases, so like that we could do that in the future, but it's the trickiest one to do and have work. So that's why we did not include it as an option, because in most cases it would not be allowed under the anti-aid amendment.
Okay. So do we have to pick are we voting on this today, or are we just talking about it?
I don't think we have to vote on this today, although we will have to come back to this, I'm assuming in our next meeting, flesh this out a little bit more, have some more clarity on, some of the options that we might actually be voting on in the future. So I don't think there's expectation we vote on this today, though.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Board Member Nelson. I see your hand, Board Member Lattimore. I'll let you go ahead, and then we'll get to you, of course, Board Member O'Malley. Next.
Thanks for your consideration. I just wanted to make sure I understand that question in that discourse that just happened between Jack and Hannah. Am I understanding, when I read option one, maybe I'm totally not getting this, because when I read it prior to this meeting, I thought option one was that the nonprofit who was the administrator could not apply for the money. But am I hearing something different, that nonprofits would not be eligible in general for the money? I want to clarify what that discourse was about.
Sure, happy to help clarify. So a nonprofit organization would need to be the grant recipient in option one. And they would need to be doing these services. If they were doing those services for another nonprofit, like in a nonprofit's building, that would be eligible. What would likely not be eligible would be a nonprofit, like the example I gave, a community health center saying, I have this building decarbonization project. I want $500,000 from the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund to install heat pumps in my community health center. That would likely not be covered. But if it was a nonprofit that is doing decarbonization work and doing energy audits, they could then go do that energy audit in that health center and complete some projects on behalf of them. That's the guidance we've been given.
Okay, I'm still scratching my head. I'm sorry. You've chosen say, for example, New Ecology. Let's just do a hypothetical. Chosen New Ecology to provide these services to constituents, and they're a nonprofit. They've been chosen. I want to make sure I understand this. And Clapham Square comes and says, we got a similar project that you just described. Hey, New Ecology, we want to apply. We would not be eligible to apply to New Ecology?
No, you would be able to get those services from the nonprofit doing those services, but you as Codman Square could not apply to the review board. You could not have a grant agreement with the review board saying, we want this money for our building. You could request those services from an entity like New Ecology doing that work that has the agreement with
services. It wouldn't just be a direct grant agreement.
Correct.
It would be a grant agreement. All grant agreements would go through New Ecology, regardless of who the entity is that is requesting the funding. All grant agreements.
End recipient. Yeah. So the agreement on the fund agreement would be between the board, the environment department, and the nonprofit providing the decarbonization services. And there would
right.
be not
I
as
see.
much
Got
oversight
it.
over the next level of that, which would be the decarbonization services for those entities.
Okay, so it's more an issue of like where the money flows, if money always flows, in this case, just hypothetically to New Ecology always. And they do the work on behalf of the entities that are requesting the money. Okay, I think I understand. Thank you, and apologies for holding up Councilor O'Malley's turn. I just want to make sure I understood this.
Yeah, thanks for being patient, Councilor O'Malley, please, or Board Member O'Malley, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, this is a great conversation to have. So happy to hear these voices, and Board Member Lattimore, I echo a lot of your questions. I want to continue that, and then I'll get to my comments. Is that the issue with this hypothetical under option 1 is that the review board and the city would have no oversight of how that nonprofit vendor decides to invest their money that we would award. Is that the right read, Hannah?
There would certainly be oversight, but there would be it would be more along the lines of in the grant agreement saying what types of buildings the nonprofit should be serving. So probably something along the lines of the nonprofit will identify BERDO buildings in these census tracts, just as an example, to provide these services to. And then the nonprofit would go and work to find those buildings and give them those services. In option 2, the review board could have more direct say in the building. So maybe it would be the same scope. We are going to serve buildings in BERDO buildings in these census tracts, but we're going to evaluate their need on a number of criteria, and the review board would actually select building A and building C, but not building B because they didn't meet the criteria.
And you're sure that we could get that specific under option 1 to include, I get having EJ populations, etc., but we could, it would be legal and lawful to include census tract as the criteria of what we'd like to see.
I am not positive on that. I could get that specifically answered, but I understand that there could be parameters put on
well, that would be important to know. And just to back things up a little bit, it's a little concerning that we've only had 5 responses to the survey that was put out, and that's not at all an indictment on the Environment Department. You guys have done amazing work, and the fact that you all put such a comprehensive survey out there. I'm wondering if, and I will take this upon myself to offer, I'm happy to get it out into my networks more to try to gin up more support. Is there some language that the Environment Department can share with board members so we could publicize this on, LinkedIn, on, some of the other social media sites where I think we could get some more response? Because I'd hate us to end and have 7 people actually weigh in on this when, this is such an important issue. So that would be helpful. I'm happy to publicize it later this week if I get some verbiage from the Environment Department. And then to be clear, the issue about the anti-aid amendment and the Uniform Procurement Act, that's because this is operating dollars. Will these stipulations exist when it's an ACP funded pool?
No, the ACPs are not taxpayer dollars, and so the anti-aid amendment would not apply. If the city were to be procuring services on behalf of the city, then we would still have to follow the procurement rule, but for grant agreements, sorry, the anti-aid amendment would not apply for the alternative compliance payment funding.
Okay, so we'll have a little bit more flexibility.
Yes.
So just to be clear, we're talking about a very generous pool of money from the mayor. And I'm just curious, when we did the BERDO ordinance, and I believe it's section G that lays out the equitable investment fund, the last bullet point says something along the line, there's sort of a rundown of what the money will be used for, and it's decarbonization and job training, et cetera. And then it says any other environmental initiative. We specifically chose that language to allow some flexibility. Can that be applied there? Or I'm assuming the Corporation Counsel and the environment department attorneys are saying, no, this is a lock solid sort of definition and interpretation of what public benefit is.
I don't know that I'm understanding the question exactly.
Okay.
Are you looking for if it could be
So
broader
let
or?
me ask this. We wanted flexibility in the equitable investment fund so that if, again, well, we're playing in hypotheticals here. If there was a nonprofit that could plant 5,000 street trees in a neighborhood that doesn't have much coverage, that would be considered a legitimate expenditure. That's clearly not building decarbonization. And that's why we had that little bit of flexibility that's why we include that line so that we wouldn't be hamstrung. We wouldn't be in a situation where we couldn't spend the money on worthwhile projects. I wonder if that is something that we should put on hold until the funds included are ACP funds and there's more flexibility. And then if operating budget, that's why this is a little bit more narrowly tailored to building a carbon abatement project specifically. Retrofits, yeah.
So I believe, and I was trying to find the ordinance language on my desk. But I believe that the way that it is written is that it needs to be for building decarbonization projects that can have additional environmental benefits. So there would have to be a core component of the project and that would be supporting building decarbonization, but there could be additional environmental benefits included in that. So like a workforce development component, a additional air quality component of a project. But my read of the ordinance is that there would need to be an element of building decarbonization. So just tree planting alone would likely not be eligible.
Okay. But it could be part of sort of a portfolio application.
I think as long as there is like the funding is being used for that primary purpose, that is kind of the overarching piece of it.
Yeah, no, I understand. Okay. Well, I don't want to take up too much more time because I know we have more to get to. I would say, and my question is, what is a realistic time where we need to decide? If I had to vote today, I would vote very strongly on option 2. I think that it gives us a lot more oversight and direction. I think it's more of what we had entailed the BERDO board to play an active role in how we expend ACP and in this case capital funds. I think as it relates to, there's clearly the con is not insignificant that it can only be for scoping, planning, or design engineering. I've been around enough large-scale decarbonization projects that's always a significant upfront cost, and I think most of the particular recipients that we'd be looking at would welcome what that would look like. And I think, I can be convinced otherwise. I see a lot of utility in option 1, but I do worry that we wouldn't have control, and I worry that the pool of potential nonprofits. I'm to reiterate some points that have been made before. I'm not sure how big that universe is. So I think option 2 would clearly be a little more work on our end, but I think it's a more prudent approach for us to take, at least initially. And that's awesome. Thank you as always, Hannah and team, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you. Well, I think we should, I'm trying to remember now, maybe you could help me with this, Hannah, but we had kind of talked through a general outline of a timeline on like how, when do we kind of need to decide this in order to hold some process, right? That would allow for folks to actually apply for these resources. So can we go back to that? And then, I think one other strand that I think I would recommend is like maybe we should consider extending the deadline for public comments. I share your concern board member O'Malley about like it's not a lot of responses, right? And so be interesting to know if we could just extend that. But I think it ties into this whole conversation about kind of our timeline. So maybe we can just kind of go through that a little bit about you know, when we were imagining this. I feel like I don't have it in front of me, a couple meetings ago, we talked about what it might look like to get to, you know, rolling this out sometime in the summer. I thought we were talking about, but I can't remember.
And I have to apologize. I do not remember either. And apologies for Diana not being here and me being not as an effective substitute for her. But I do not recall off the top of my head what the exact timeline we had laid out was. I think we are wanting to collect the feedback from the survey, integrate that, finalize the evaluation. Either of these options, our team would need to draft the scope of work kind of for either the grant opportunity, right, the grant application, or the scope of work for the RFP. I think likely those processes will take some time, and we'll need to come back to the board to get feedback on that, to make sure that we're kind of moving in the right direction and responding to your input. So I know I believe Diana had said like ideally trying to get this out in the summer. I think that's still doable, but we can come back with an update to the board on timeline and maybe map out some of the different options.
I think that would be great if we could, come to our next meeting with, just lined out a little bit more about some of the key steps here. I think we're going to have to come back to the question about the amounts, and then I would appreciate also just making sure that we understand, you know, a number of the comments were just about why can't some of the nonprofits just get the direct funding to do some of the work. And so just want to make sure we get that ruling and understand it a little bit, but it sounds like that's pretty clear, but I just want to make sure. And I also had similar, just one last thing on my end, similar questions about the definition of the public benefit of the fund on slide 7 that I think, you know, board member O'Malley was referencing is just, I had also thought there was a bit of a broader interpretation that we were allowed, but in any case, I think it's helpful just to talk about timeline, and then we can get back to the details. And it sounds like we're going to need to do that as soon as our next meeting. I guess my question about extending the deadline for public comments on the forums, given we've got 5 responses, deadline currently is this Friday, I believe, right? The 12th is what we said. So just curious if that's something that we would be interested in extending, and if so, like, you know, would we do it for a couple more weeks, I think is the question. That might be what I would propose is give us an additional couple weeks, and then come back to our next meeting with a little bit more thought out on the timeline, and then we can dig back into this conversation around some of the other specifics. Curious, maybe we could just get any other comments or questions from board members and see what y'all think about extending the deadline for public comments. Board member Lattimore.
Thank you. I'm fine with extending for a couple of weeks the deadline if it aligns with the overall process that the city had for getting this activating this fund. I had a question or a comment about getting more feedback, because I agree it would be great to have more feedback, and that is, I think the city's done a great job at the different categories of who you've asked or put this to, and I would ask or wonder if it makes sense to put this to, and maybe it's included in some of these subcategories that you had listed, but put this to all people, all entities that have commented already on any aspect of BERDO. Like, you know, putting it in front, like, I don't know how exactly, but maybe is there a way to anyone that's commented on any aspect of BERDO putting this issue to them? That's my comment.
Thank you, Board Member.
Yeah, Hannah, could the city send an email directly to members of the different working groups and ask them for their input? If we put a button right in front of them, it might be easier than expecting them to check the websites and stuff.
Yes, we can certainly send this to the working group members. I believe it's been sent to at least the commercial real estate working group, and I need to confirm with Diana if it's been sent to the hospitals. If not, we will. And thank you for that suggestion, Board Member Lattimore. We will take a look at that. I think we've probably reached almost everyone who's commented through our various newsletters that people are signed up for, but we can check that and look at that option as well.
Do you know, Hannah, if we need a formal vote to extend the deadline? You know, if it were 2 more weeks, we'd be talking about April 26th. Is that as a formal vote of this board required?
I don't believe so, because I think it's an informal comment period.
Oh, that's right. It is. You're exactly right. Okay. And are there any other just concerns about extending it, or any other just comments specific to that? I would like to at least agree on that, and then see if there's any other closing comments, and then I know I want to make sure we get back to public comments on this as well, the folks who are still with us. All right. Just a straw poll. Are people okay with extending it a couple more weeks? Give like a hands up or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
I would suggest we extend it till the end of the month because we've got school vacation next week. And then I think we'll all do a good job. I think sending out something to list with just the survey language will hopefully yield more responses, and then maybe that can help dictate a little bit of how we move forward on either option 1 or option 2 relative to the first tranche of operating budget funds that we can help disperse.
Sounds good. Okay, then I think what I would like to move to, unless there's any other burning comments or questions from the board members, I'd love to go to the public comment period. Okay, let's do it. So we will now open the meeting to public comment. As a reminder, members of the public, to provide public comment, you can raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and can't use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. You can also send your questions to staff via email at berdoreviewboard@boston.gov. You know, as a reminder, let's try to keep our comments to 3 minutes if possible, so we make sure everyone has a chance. I don't think we've had a problem with this in the past, but just be aware of that. And then obviously, please introduce yourself, your organization, the neighborhood you're in. Would love to know that. So let's ask members of the public. Anyone like to join us and make a public comment, ask a question? We would really appreciate it. And I know there are comments already in the chat, so might go to that as well specifically. But if there's someone who'd like to speak, we'd love to hear from you. Okay. I did see a question. I don't know if anyone, Hannah or others, have a response to this, but there was a question from Evie Torrey. Is it similar to the Mass Save model using technical assistance providers? Are any of you all familiar with this? I am not.
I
not.
Oh.
No, I was trying to understand the question. I don't know where he's coming from. But no, you can go. You can go.
Yeah, I am not exactly sure if Eva's still on and you remember what you were referencing.
I think it
This
has
is
to
a-
do with the comment that I was making about, you know, when we were talking about how people get to the money, like a nonprofit, they have to go to like Codman, for example, hypothetically go to that nonprofit that the city would hire in option 1, I think it was. I think that's when she's not here. No, he or she is here. So I'll let them represent themselves.
Yeah, thank you. So I was just, I can't remember honestly, it was a little while ago. But it was more to do with that, the review board would have oversight of which nonprofit the money was going to. And then the nonprofit would then select the projects. And my understanding is that that's a bit the way Mass Save works with its technical assistance providers, that they get X amount of funding and then, you know, work with directly with the projects. So I was just wondering if it was if we were talking about something parallel or not, and whether that may or may not be a useful model to look at. So.
All right, thank you for that. Any other members of the public just have any questions or comments you'd like to bring in? Again, love to hear your voice and jump on, but you can also email folks, email our staff, whichever.
I can make one other comment about
Yeah, please.
we did bring up the 3 aspects of the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund at the recent commercial real estate BERDO group, and asked for comments. We haven't had any, and we did also email a lot of the folks we have worked on BERDO comments with a lot, and haven't had any either. From where I sit, I just think everybody is massively burnt out, honestly. And it's just it's really becoming increasingly difficult to get useful information when they've kind of been doing this for 2 years, and I'm just finding it harder from my point of view to get really useful feedback. So I'm not sure it's because we're not reaching the right people. I think it's just, I'm not sure the people who are the right people have a lot of capacity. That's my take.
I definitely hear that. Thank you. Yeah, it's I think it's been very intentional, the process, right, to engage both through the working groups, through other formations of like really solicit as much feedback as possible. And I think we're creating a lot of stuff here that, you know, maybe doesn't really exist in the same ways in a lot of other scenarios. So anyway, I think we're just gonna have to keep trying. And I also recognize that like there might be a certain level of fatigue that also sets in at a certain point. So we're gonna do our best, I think, to keep, you know, both the materials engaging, figure out ways to keep engaging folks in the best way possible. So I think we're all eager to get the implementation, but we got some stuff to figure out. All right, any other and yeah, thank you for continuing to try to get those comments and public comments back. Any other just last members of the public would like to make any offer any comments or questions? Okay. If not, I think we are ready to move on to our third agenda item. So we will close the public comment period. Thank you again. Thanks all for being on, members of the public. We're going to move on to agenda item number 3. And so we're going to hear some administrative updates. And Hannah, I think we're going back to you.
Yes, thank you. So just a few updates to share. One, the city has contracted with RDH to provide technical capacity building for the review board. So I believe they've already reached out to the review board members with a survey. So if you have not yet taken that survey, board members, please do that by the end of the day on Wednesday. RDH estimates that it will take around 30 minutes, and the intention of this is to gauge current understanding of different technical topics related to BERDO and building decarbonization. And this will inform some of the next steps that they will be taking. So their work is to provide training and capacity building to the review board, as well as providing on-call technical services to the board, specifically around reviewing flexibility applications, but other things that may come up. And then preparing accessible materials on compliance options for building owners and the public. So we're really excited to have RDH on board. They bring a lot of great experience in building engineering, building science, as well as technical writing and communication. So they you'll be hearing from them more at future meetings and engaging with them more as we really dig into this project. Just a quick overview of the estimated project timeline. This is all subject to change, but the first piece around technical training and capacity building for the board, we're really trying to do this in the spring and summer. So hitting the ground running with these with the survey that's out now, and then they're scheduling interviews with board members to try to get some more information from you all. So if you are more of a person who would rather take the time to talk to someone and answer questions, that can be, you can do more of that in the interview. If you're someone who likes to write really in-depth responses, you can spend more of your time in the survey. So there are kind of those two options for you, but please try to complete the survey as well. Then the on-call technical services, this is really going to ramp up, we think, starting in June as we begin to get more of those applications in and running through the remainder of the calendar year. Accessible materials, we're also trying to front load that, so there's more resources for the board as well as members of the public sooner than later. And then we'll continue to engage with them and kind of address or scope their time and support for the board as needed. So please reach out to Diana if you have questions about this contract, the scope of work, or if there are specific things that you would want to see and are not seeing in this. And I also will note, I did share in the boards folder a copy of the request for proposals. That is the public RFP call for requests for proposals from vendors and how we selected the vendor. Just an update that, again, the review board, our nominations for the review board open seat, those nominations closed on March 8th. The mayor is, hopefully we'll be making an announcement soon on sending one of the selected nominees to the council for approval, but I don't have a public update on that yet. And then finally, on the meeting schedule, we wanted to just flag that there is a meeting that falls on May 27th, which is Memorial Day. So a proposal for the board is that if there are applications queued up by May 17th, which is when we would need to post that agenda. So if we have received applications for flexibility by then, that we would propose moving the meeting to Tuesday, May 28th. And if there were not applications, then proposing canceling that meeting. But open to other suggestions as well, just a starting point for how to handle that. So Chair Matt Sueda, I don't know if you want to gauge interest on that or we can follow up offline.
I think that sounds great. We'll just work backwards. I mean, members of the board, are there just any comments about the proposal for the May 27th meeting? Any reactions to that or other ideas? I think those options make sense to me.
Yeah, I would just say I will actually be looking at a 40 megawatt heat pump in Esbjerg, Denmark on May 27th. So I will not be able to make this meeting probably either way. But I think that's a good approach, Hannah. Potentially move it or cancel it.
Sounds like an awesome trip. Would love to.
Yeah. Be happy to share when I get back.
And great. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just curious to make sure we will have quorum. Obviously, we're going to need that. Yeah, if there are any other major, issues that are going to pop up that particular week, it'd be good to know. And then obviously offline, we have other board members that aren't with us that we need to hear from. But yeah, Board Member Lattimore, please.
Thank you. No, I agree. The May 27th meeting needs to be adjusted. So, and I think I have availability if it's the 28th, but I'll double check. I did comment on the RDH survey about June. I'm pretty much out of the country for much of June, which is, so I have to double check. There may be one meeting I can make in June, but I know that's not the question, but I just want to make that statement and I made it in the survey.
I will respond to this definitively, but I think I may also have a conflict on the 28th, the Tuesday evening. So I will just confirm that. And if not, I think happy to meet then, or if no applications, I agree, we can cancel it. Great. If there's nothing else on the meeting schedule, we can come back to the review board nominees. I did see the comment in the chat here. I thought Hassan was one of the names that we had got in. I know one other person. It sounds like there were three.
Yes.
We did receive this, correct, Hannah?
Yes. So if I may jump in this, so apologies. I did not see this go to the council. So I think something must have just gotten lost in translation last week. But yes, it is now public then that the mayor has put forth Hassan Faruqi as the nominee for the review board seat. So that will be, I don't know if the council voted on it last week or if they're reviewing it. Apologies for not having, perhaps Councilor Coletta has an answer on that.
I'm happy to provide an answer. It was referred to the committee, my committee. Happy to have a expeditious hearing to review and look forward to the conversation. But Hassan is a credible individual, and I look forward to his potential passage.
Wonderful. Thank you. And apologies. That was just me not being in the loop on everything, not trying to hide anything from the board.
Of course, yeah. No. And then I think we should get back to RDH. It sounds like some of us have already filled out the survey. I have not. I got to fill out the survey by Wednesday. I have responded to the interviews, but hopefully this scope of work looks good to folks. I know in my case, I'm really interested. I would even love to see samples of like what accessible materials mean to them, because I feel like we're in desperate need of good materials that help break down what tends to be pretty overwhelming and confusing to some. So in any case, I'm eager to get this rolling, and hopefully they do some good work here. But any other just comments from members of the board about RDH? I think everyone should have those interviews on your calendar that you need to respond to, the surveys as well. But any other just comments about the scope of work, anything else around RDH? Okay. Excellent. Is there anything else around the administrative updates? If not,
Chair, I have just one last thing. You likely saw an email from Diana about BERDO regulations, and just noting that there is going to be an Air Pollution Control Commission hearing next week. And part of that agenda is to review and vote on updates to the regulations that are just correcting typos and clarifying edits. If you should have received the red line edit from Diana, and that is also online. So if you would like to review it, more than welcome to, and that will be discussed and reviewed by the Air Pollution Control Commission on next Wednesday at their meeting at 2:30 p.m. But just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that. If you've looked at the changes, they are very minor and just correcting a few typos and small clarification edits.
Thanks for that, Hannah. So as you showed on the calendar, our next meeting looks like it's going to be on is that Earth Day, 22nd of April. And obviously, as always, people should just respond, make sure we have quorum, so we'll make sure people just respond to the calendar invite there. But I believe we're finished with agenda item 3 and can move on. Does that sound good, members of the board?
Yes.
Okay. So we get to the stage now, very simple. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Excellent. So as before, all board members in favor, you can raise your hand or say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay? Okay, I think the ayes have it. The motion passes. The meeting is adjourned at 5:55 p.m. Thank you, everyone. You all have a great rest of
Thanks.
the evening and day.
Bye.
Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.